A woman crawls from the wreckage of a massacre with nothing but breath in her lungs and blood on her hands. A stranger finds her at his gate, silent, suspicious, and carrying ghosts of his own. In the dead of winter, survival isn't charity, it's a gamble, and neither of them knows yet that saving each other might be the most dangerous choice they ever make. If you want to see how far two broken people can go when the world offers no second chances, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The first thing Alara Vance felt when she opened her eyes was cold. Not the kind that bit at your fingertips or made your breath fog in front of your face. This was the cold that lived inside you, wrapped around your ribs, sank its teeth into your bones, and refused to let go. It was the cold of a body that had given up on warmth, that had traded heat for one more heartbeat. She lay face down in dirt that smelled like ash and iron. Her fingers dug into the soil, nails cracked and black with dried blood. Somewhere in the distance, a crow cawed. The sound was sharp, mocking. She tried to move, and her body screamed in protest. Ribs that felt cracked, a shoulder dislocated, or worse, skin torn open along her side where something had cut deep. She turned her head slowly. The world swam. Behind her, smoke still rose in thin ribbons from what used to be a wagon. The canvas was shredded, the wood splintered and scorched. Bodies lay scattered in the dirt like discarded tools. Men she'd traveled with, women who'd shared hardtack and bad coffee around a fire the night before. A child's doll sat in the dust, one arm missing. Alara closed her eyes. She should have been one of them. She would have been if the man with the scarred face hadn't gotten distracted by the woman screaming 2 wagons over. If the knife he'd pulled hadn't caught on his belt. If Alara hadn't grabbed the iron skillet from the fire and swung it so hard his skull cracked like an egg. She'd run. Didn't remember much after that. Just trees, darkness, the taste of copper in her mouth, the sound of her own ragged breathing, and now this, dirt, cold, silence. She forced herself to her knees. The world tilted, her vision blurred, sharpened, blurred again. She pressed a hand to her side and it came away wet. Fresh blood. Not old. That wasn't good. She needed to move, needed to find water, shelter, something. But her legs wouldn't hold her. She made it 3 steps before she collapsed again, this time onto her hands and knees. Her arms shook. Her breath came in short, painful gasps. "Get up," she whispered to herself. "Get up." Her body didn't listen. The sky above was flat and gray, the kind of sky that promised nothing but more cold, more wind, more of the same slow death she was already living. She thought about staying there, thought about letting the cold finish what the bandits had started. It would be easier. But something in her, something stubborn and bitter, and too damned mean to die quietly, pushed her forward. One hand, one knee, then the other, crawling like an animal through the dirt. She didn't know where she was going. Didn't care. Just knew she had to keep moving. The trees thinned, the ground leveled out. And then, through the haze of pain and exhaustion, she saw it. A fence. Old, crooked, half-rotted in places, but standing. And beyond the fence, a cabin. Small, rough-hewn, smoke rising from the chimney. Alara's heart stuttered. She didn't know if anyone was inside. Didn't know if they'd shoot her on sight or leave her to rot. But it didn't matter. It was the only chance she had. She dragged herself toward the gate. Her vision tunneled, her hands scraped against wood. She felt splinters dig into her palms, but couldn't feel the pain anymore. Everything was distant now, like she was watching herself from somewhere far away. She reached the porch, pulled herself up the first step, the second, the third, and then her strength gave out. She collapsed against the door, her cheek pressed to the rough wood, her breath shallow and uneven. The last thing she heard before the darkness took her was the sound of the door opening. Pum-pum. Rowan Hale didn't like surprises. He'd learned a long time ago that surprises were just another word for trouble, and trouble was something he'd had enough of to last 3 lifetimes. So when he heard the thud against his door, heavy, deliberate, wrong, he didn't rush to open it. He set down the knife he'd been sharpening, wiped his hands on his pants, picked up the rifle leaning against the wall by the fireplace. Then he walked to the door and opened it slow. What he found wasn't what he expected. A woman. Young, maybe mid-20s, filthy, blood-soaked. Her hair was matted to her face, her clothes torn and crusted with dirt and worse. She lay crumpled on his porch like someone had thrown her there and forgotten to come back. Rowan stood there for a long moment, rifle still in hand, staring down at her. His first thought was that she was dead. His second thought was that he didn't need this. But then her chest moved, just barely, a shallow, rattling breath that said she was still hanging on by a thread. Rowan muttered a curse under his breath. He looked past her, scanning the tree line. No movement, no horses, no sign of whoever had done this to her or whether they were still coming. He crouched down, sets the rifle aside, and pressed 2 fingers to her neck. Her pulse was weak but steady. Her skin was cold, clammy. He pulled back the torn fabric at her side and grimaced. Deep cut, maybe from a blade. Infected, probably. She'd lose the arm if she didn't get it cleaned soon. Maybe lose more than that. Damn it, he muttered. He didn't know her anything. The smart thing to do would be to leave her where she was, maybe cover her with a blanket so she didn't freeze before she bled out. Let nature take its course. But Rowan had never been good at doing the smart thing. He slid his arms under her, one beneath her shoulders, one beneath her knees, and lifted. She was lighter than he expected, too light. He carried her inside, kicked the door shut behind him, and laid her on the bed in the corner. The bed he hadn't used in over a year. He worked quickly, stripped off her coat, her shirt, cut away the fabric stuck to the wound, boiled water, found the old medical kit his mother had left behind before she died, cleaned the wound as best he could, poured whiskey over it even though it made the woman's body jerk and a low, broken sound escape her throat. He stitched her up with thread meant for mending harnesses. His hands were steady. He'd done this before, on himself, on his horse, on a neighbor's kid who'd gotten gored by a steer. It wasn't pretty, but it held. When he was done, he wrapped her side in clean cloth, covered her with a blanket, and stepped back. She didn't wake. Rowan stood there, arms crossed, staring down at her like she was a puzzle he didn't have the pieces for. "Who the hell are you?" he said quietly. She didn't answer. He didn't expect her to. Woke. Elara woke to the smell of smoke and something cooking. Her eyes opened slowly. The ceiling above her was low, rough wood, stained dark from years of fire smoke. The light was dim, just the flicker of a fire somewhere to her left. She tried to sit up. Pain exploded through her side and she gasped, falling back against the pillow. "Don't move." The voice came from across the room, low, rough, male. Elara turned her head and saw him. A man. Broad-shouldered, dark-haired, maybe late 30s. He sat at a small table near the fire, a plate in front of him, a knife in one hand. He didn't look at her, just kept eating. "Where am I?" she managed. Her voice was hoarse, barely more than a whisper. "My house," he said. "Who are you?" "Rowan Hale." She waited for more. He didn't offer it. "How long?" 2 days. Elara blinked. 2 days. She didn't remember anything after the porch. Didn't remember him carrying her inside, stitching her up, keeping her alive. "Why?" she asked. Rowan finally looked at her. His eyes were dark, unreadable. "Because you were dying on my porch," he said. "Didn't seem right to leave you there." "That's it?" "That's it." Elara studied him. He wasn't a kind man. She could tell that much just by looking at him. His face was hard, weathered, the kind of face that came from years of not trusting anyone. But he'd saved her, and she didn't know what to do with that. "Thank you," she said quietly. Rowan shrugged. "Don't thank me yet. You might not make it." Comforting. Wasn't trying to be. He stood, walked over to the fire, and ladled something from a pot into a bowl. He brought it to her, set it on the small table beside the bed. "Eat," he said. "You need the strength." Elara looked at the bowl. It was some kind of stew, thin, mostly broth, but there were chunks of meat and vegetables floating in it. Her stomach twisted with hunger. She tried to sit up again, slower this time, gritting her teeth through the pain. Rowan didn't help her, just watched. When she finally managed to prop herself up against the wall, she picked up the bowl and took a sip. It was bland, undersalted, but it was warm, and it was food, and she didn't care. "What happened to you?" Rowan asked. Elara paused, the bowl halfway to her lips. "Bandits," she said. "Hit our wagon train 3 days out from the last settlement. Killed everyone. I ran." "How many?" "I don't know. 10, maybe more." Rowan nodded slowly. You kill any of them? Alara met his eyes. One. Good. He turned and walked back to the table, sat down, and resumed eating. Alara watched him. He didn't ask her name. Didn't ask where she'd come from or where she'd been going. Didn't offer sympathy or comfort, and somehow that made it easier. She finished the stew in silence. Sat. The first week passed in a haze. Alara slept most of the time. When she was awake, Rowan brought her food, checked her wound, changed her bandages. He didn't talk much, didn't ask questions, didn't hover. She liked that about him. By the end of the second week, she could sit up without wanting to scream. By the third, she could stand, walk a few steps, make it to the door and back without collapsing. Rowan watched her like a hawk, arms crossed, expression neutral. You're stubborn, he'd said one afternoon. So are you, she shot back. He almost smiled. Almost. You got a name? He asked. Alara? Alara what? Vance. He nodded. Where were you headed? West, looking for work. Doing what? Anything. Didn't matter. Rowan studied her. You got people? No. Anyone looking for you? No. Good. Alara frowned. Why is that good? Because if someone comes looking, they'll bring trouble. And I don't need trouble. Then why'd you let me stay? Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Because you were already here, he said finally. Didn't make sense to throw you out after I stitched you up. Alara didn't believe that. Not entirely, but she didn't push. By the fourth week, Alara was moving around the cabin like she'd always been there. She washed the dishes, swept the floor, mended a tear in one of Rowan's shirts without asking. He came in from chopping wood one afternoon and found her standing at the stove, stirring something in the pot. What are you doing? He asked. Making dinner, she said. You don't have to. I know. He stood there, axe still in hand, looking at her like he didn't know what to make of her. You planning on staying? He asked. Alara turned to face him. You planning on kicking me out? Didn't say that. Then I'm staying. Rowan set the axe down. This isn't charity. I know. If you stay, you work. I know. And if you bring trouble to my door, I won't. He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded. All right. And that was it. No handshake, no agreement on paper, just two people who'd found themselves in the same place with nowhere else to go. I'm missing the axe. Winter came early that year. The first snow fell in late October, light and quiet, dusting the ground like flour. By November, the storms had started in earnest. The wind howled through the cracks in the cabin walls, and the temperature dropped so low that Alara's breath hung in the air even inside. Rowan worked from dawn to dusk, chopping wood, fixing the roof, reinforcing the fence, checking the traps he'd set in the woods. He was relentless, methodical, always moving. Alara watched him, learned his rhythms, started helping without being asked. She hauled water from the well, stacked firewood, salted the meat from the traps and hung it to dry. She wasn't strong, not yet, but she was determined. And Rowan noticed. One evening, as they sat by the fire eating in silence, he said, You learn fast. Alara looked up. Had to. Most people don't. Most people didn't grow up the way I did. Rowan raised an eyebrow. How'd you grow up? Alara hesitated, then she shrugged. Poor hungry. My father died when I was 8. My mother remarried a man who didn't want kids around, so I left. How old were you? 14. Rowan didn't say anything, just nodded. What about you? Alara asked. What about me? How'd you end up here? Rowan stared into the fire. Built this place with my father. He died. I stayed. That's it? That's it. Alara didn't push. She'd learned that much about him already. He didn't give more than he wanted to give. And she respected that, because she was the same way. The storms got worse. In December, a blizzard hit that lasted 3 days straight. The wind screamed like something alive, rattling the shutters, tearing at the roof. Snow piled up against the cabin walls, halfway to the windows. Alara and Rowan stayed inside, burning through their wood supply faster than they should have. The fire was the only thing keeping them from freezing to death. On the second night, the temperature inside the cabin dropped so low that Alara could see her breath even sitting 2 feet from the fire. She was wrapped in every blanket she could find, shivering so hard her teeth chattered. Rowan looked at her from across the room. "Come here," he said. She frowned. "What?" "You're freezing. Come here." Alara hesitated. Then she stood, dragging the blankets with her, and sat down beside him. Rowan pulled one of the blankets over both of them. "Body heat," he said simply. Alara nodded. She didn't argue. They sat there in silence, shoulders touching, staring into the fire. And for the first time in weeks, Alara felt warm. By January, the ranch was falling apart. The roof leaked in 3 places. The fence had collapsed on the north side. One of the outbuildings had lost half its wall to the wind. The well was frozen solid. Rowan stood in the snow, staring at the damage, his jaw tight. "Can it be fixed?" Alara asked. "Maybe," he said, "if we get to it before the next storm." "Then let's get to it." Rowan looked at her. "You're still recovering." "I'm fine." "You're not." "I'm fine enough." He shook his head. "You don't have to—" "I'm not asking for permission," Alara said. "I'm telling you I'm helping. You saved my life. This is how I pay you back." Rowan stared at her for a long moment. Then he handed her a hammer. "All right," he said. "Let's go." Chet. They worked through the cold. Alara's hands blistered. Her side ached. Her muscles screamed in protest. But she didn't stop. Rowan didn't stop either. They rebuilt the fence, patched the roof, reinforced the outbuilding, broke the ice on the well, and hauled buckets of water back to the cabin. It was brutal, exhausting. But they got it done. And when they finally collapsed by the fire that night, too tired to speak, Alara felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. Rowan looked over at her. "You did good today," he said. Alara smiled faintly. "So did you." He almost smiled back. Almost. The rest of the winter passed in silence and labor. They didn't talk much. Didn't need to. But something was shifting between them. Something quiet. Something unspoken. Something that neither of them was ready to name. Not yet. February came in cold and mean. The kind of cold that made your lungs burn with every breath, that turned the ground to iron and the air to knives. Alara woke before dawn most mornings now. Her body adjusted to the rhythm of survival that ruled this place. She'd lie there in the narrow bed Rowan had given her, the one he used to sleep in before she arrived, and listen to the sound of him moving around the cabin, the creak of floorboards, the scrape of the kettle on the stove, the soft thud of wood being added to the fire. He never woke her, never asked her to get up. But she did anyway. By the time the sun crept over the horizon, they were already outside. The work was endless, the kind of work that broke you down and built you back up harder. Alara's hands, once soft and unmarked, were now calloused and scarred. Her shoulders had broadened, her legs were stronger. She could lift a bucket of water without her arms shaking, could swing an axe without missing, could work a full day without needing to sit down. Rowan noticed. He didn't say anything, he never did, but she caught him watching her sometimes, a flicker of something in his eyes. Approval, maybe. Or surprise. One morning, as they worked side by side, reinforcing the chicken coop, he said, "You've gotten stronger." Alara glanced at him. "Had to. Most people would have left by now. Where would I go?" Rowan didn't answer, just hammered another nail into the wood. Alara watched him for a moment. "You want me to leave?" He stopped, looked at her. "No." "Then why bring it up?" "Just making an observation." Alara went back to work, but something in her chest loosened. He didn't want her to leave. That mattered, more than it should have. The truth was, she didn't want to leave either. She'd stopped thinking about it weeks ago, stopped imagining herself somewhere else. This place, this cold, brutal, unforgiving place, had become something she didn't expect. It had become home. Or close enough. They finished the chicken coop by midday. Alara stood back, wiping sweat from her forehead despite the cold, and surveyed their work. "Not bad," she said. Rowan grunted. It'll hold. High praise. He almost smiled. Don't get used to it. They walked back to the cabin together. The snow crunched under their boots. The sky was heavy and gray, threatening another storm. Inside, Alara started making lunch while Rowan checked the traps he'd set near the tree line. She moved around the small kitchen with practiced ease now, knowing where everything was, how Rowan liked things done. She made coffee strong and black, fried up the last of the salt pork and some potatoes. When Rowan came back, he was carrying 2 rabbits. Good haul, Alara said. Better than yesterday. He skinned and cleaned them at the table while Alara finished cooking. They ate in silence, as they usually did. But it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind of silence that came from understanding, from not needing to fill the air with words just to prove you weren't alone. After lunch, Rowan stood and pulled on his coat. "Where are you going?" Alara asked. "Need to check the north fence. Saw tracks this morning." "What kind of tracks?" "Wolf?" Alara's stomach tightened. "You going alone?" "Always do." "Not today." Rowan turned to look at her. "You don't need to." "I know I don't need to," Alara said, "but I'm coming anyway." He held her gaze for a long moment, then he nodded. "Grab the rifle," he said. They walked through the snow together, Rowan in front, Alara a few steps behind. The tracks were easy to follow, large paw prints, deep and deliberate, leading toward the fence line. "How many?" Alara asked. 3, maybe 4. That's a lot. Pack's been moving through the area for a while now. Winter's hard on them, too. Alara gripped the rifle tighter. "You think they'll come for the livestock?" "If they're hungry enough." They reached the fence. The tracks circled it, then veered off into the woods. Rowan crouched down, studying the ground. "They were here last night." "Testing the fence?" "Maybe." Alara scanned the tree line. The forest was thick, dark, the kind of place where anything could be watching, and you'd never know. "We should reinforce it," she said. Rowan nodded. "Tomorrow." They turned to head back, but before they'd gone more than a few steps, Alara heard it. A low growl. She froze. Rowan's hand went to the pistol at his hip. The growl came again, closer this time, and then the wolf stepped out from between the trees. It was massive, gray and black, its eyes yellow and cold. It stood there watching them, muscles coiled. "Don't move," Rowan said quietly. Alara's heart hammered in her chest. She tightened her grip on the rifle. The wolf took a step forward. "Rowan, I see it." Another step. Rowan drew his pistol, slow and deliberate. "If it charges, shoot." "What about you?" "I'll handle it." The wolf's lips pulled back, revealing teeth like broken glass. And then it lunged. Rowan fired. The shot echoed through the trees, sharp and final. The wolf yelped, stumbled, and collapsed into the snow. Alara exhaled hard, her hands shaking. Rowan walked over to the body, crouched down, checked it. Dead. Alara lowered the rifle. "You didn't hesitate." "Can't afford to." She looked at him, at the way he stood there, calm and unflinching, like killing a wolf was just another task on the list. "You've done this before," she said. "More times than I can count." Alara nodded slowly. She didn't know why that surprised her. Rowan was a survivor. He did what needed doing, no hesitation, no regret. She was starting to understand that about him. Rowan slung the wolf over his shoulder. "Come on, we'll skin it tonight. Pelt's worth keeping." They walked back to the cabin in silence. That night, Rowan taught Alara how to skin a wolf. It was messy, brutal work. Her hands were slick with blood by the time they finished. But she didn't complain, didn't look away. Rowan watched her work. "You got a strong stomach. Had to develop one." "Most women would have turned green by now." Alara shot him a look. "I'm not most women." "No," Rowan said quietly. "You're not." Something in his voice made her pause. She looked up at him, but he'd already turned away, hanging the pelt to dry. Later, as they sat by the fire, Alara said, "Why'd you stay?" Rowan glanced at her. "What?" "After your father died. Why'd you stay here?" He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "Didn't have anywhere else to go." "That's not a reason. It's the only one I've got." Alara studied him. "You could have sold this place, gone somewhere easier." "Could have. But you didn't." "No." "Why?" Rowan stared into the fire. Because this is mine. My father built it. I'm not giving it up. Elara nodded. She understood that. The need to hold on to something, to prove you could. What about you? Rowan asked. What about me? Why'd you leave home? Elara hesitated. Then she said, because staying would have killed me. Rowan looked at her, waited. My stepfather, Elara said slowly. He wasn't a good man, drank too much, had a temper. My mother wouldn't leave him, so I did. How old were you? 14? Where'd you go? Anywhere I could. Worked in kitchens, cleaned houses, slept in barns when I had to. She paused. It wasn't easy, but it was better than staying. Rowan nodded. You ever go back? No. You want to? No. He didn't push, just poked at the fire with a stick, sending sparks up into the darkness. You're stronger than you think, he said quietly. Elara looked at him. So are you. Their eyes met across the fire, and for a moment neither of them looked away. The next morning they reinforced the fence. It took all day. The ground was frozen solid, and driving the posts in was like trying to nail through stone. Elara's arms ached, her back screamed, but she didn't stop. Rowan worked beside her, silent and relentless. He didn't offer to do her share, didn't try to take over, just worked. And Elara respected him for it. By the time the sun started to set, the fence was done, stronger than before. High enough and solid enough to keep the wolves out. Rowan stood back, hands on his hips, surveying their work. That'll do, he said. Elara wiped the sweat from her face. You say that about everything. Because it's true. She laughed. Actually laughed. It was the first time in weeks, and it surprised both of them. Rowan looked at her, something flickering in his expression. What? Elara asked. Nothing. You're staring. No, I'm not. You are. Rowan turned away, but not before she saw the faint hint of color in his cheeks. Elara grinned. Maybe he wasn't as unreadable as he liked to pretend. That night the storm hit. It came in fast and furious, the wind screaming like something wounded. Snow battered the cabin walls. The shutters rattled so hard Elara thought they'd rip off. She sat by the fire, wrapped in a blanket, watching Rowan pace. It'll hold, she said. I know. Then why are you pacing? I'm not pacing. You are. Rowan stopped, looked at her. You're annoying. You're predictable. He shook his head, but there was something almost fond in the gesture. The storm raged on. Around midnight, one of the shutters finally gave. It tore free with a crack like a gunshot, and snow poured in through the open window. Rowan swore, grabbing his coat. I'll help, Elara said, standing. Stay inside. Like hell. She pulled on her coat and followed him out into the storm. The wind hit her like a fist. She could barely see 3 feet in front of her. Snow stung her face, her hands, every inch of exposed skin. Rowan was already at the window, wrestling with the broken shutter. Elara grabbed the other side, and together they hauled it back into place. Rowan nailed it down, his hands moving fast despite the cold. Hold it steady, he shouted over the wind. Elara pressed her weight against the wood, gritting her teeth. Rowan drove the last nail in. Got it! They stumbled back inside, slamming the door shut behind them. Elara stood there, shivering, her hair plastered to her face. Rowan looked at her. You didn't have to do that. Yes, I did. Why? Because you can't do everything alone. Rowan stared at her, and for the first time since she'd met him, he looked like he didn't know what to say. Elara pulled off her coat and hung it by the fire. You're stubborn, you know that? So are you. Good thing we've got that in common. Rowan shook his head. But he was almost smiling. Almost. The storm lasted 3 days. By the time it finally broke, the snow was piled so high against the cabin that they had to dig their way out. Elara and Rowan worked in shifts, shoveling snow, clearing paths, checking the livestock. The chickens were fine. The horse was restless but unharmed. Everything had held. That night they sat by the fire, exhausted and silent. Elara looked over at Rowan. We did it. Yeah. You sound surprised. I'm not. You are. Rowan met her eyes. Maybe a little. Elara smiled. We're a good team. Rowan didn't answer, but he didn't disagree either. and that was enough. March came in quieter. The storms eased, the days grew longer. The sun, when it appeared, felt almost warm. Alara spent more time outside. She tended the chickens, started planning a garden for when the ground thawed, fixed the broken handle on the well bucket. Rowan watched her sometimes. She'd catch him standing in the doorway, arms crossed, just watching. "What?" she'd ask. "Nothing." "You're staring again." "I'm not." But he was. One afternoon, as Alara was mending a hole in the chicken wire, Rowan walked over. "You planning on staying?" he asked. Alara looked up. "You asking me to leave?" "No." "Then I'm staying," Rowan nodded. "Good." Alara set down the wire. "Why is it good?" "Because I don't want you to go." The words hung in the air between them. Alara stared at him. "You don't?" "No." "Why?" Rowan looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, "Because this place is better with you in it." Alara's chest tightened. She didn't know what to say. Rowan turned and walked back toward the cabin, and Alara stood there, heart pounding, wondering when exactly everything had changed. That night, they sat by the fire like they always did. But something was different. The air felt heavier, charged. Alara glanced at Rowan. He was staring into the flames, his expression unreadable. "Rowan," she said quietly. He looked at her. "Thank you." "For what?" "For letting me stay. For not asking questions. For treating me like I matter." Rowan's jaw tightened. "You do matter." "I know, but most people wouldn't have cared." "I'm not most people." "No," Alara said softly. "You're not." They held each other's gaze. And then, slowly, Rowan reached out and took her hand. Alara's breath caught. His hand was rough, calloused, warm. She didn't pull away. Neither did he. They sat there, hands clasped, staring at each other across the fire. And for the first time in a long time, Alara felt something she thought she'd lost forever. Hope. The next morning, everything was the same. And everything was different. They worked side by side like always, ate meals together, sat by the fire. But now, when their hands brushed, it felt deliberate. When their eyes met, it felt like a conversation. When Rowan said her name, it sounded different, softer. Alara didn't know what to call it, didn't know if she wanted to. But she knew one thing for certain. She wasn't going anywhere, and neither was he. By the end of March, the snow had started to melt. The ground was still frozen, but patches of brown earth were beginning to show through. The air smelled different, less sharp, almost soft. Alara stood outside one morning, face tilted toward the sun, eyes closed. Rowan walked up beside her. "What are you doing?" he asked. "Feeling the sun." "It's barely warm." "I don't care." Rowan looked at her, at the way the light caught her hair, her face, the faint smile on her lips. "You look happy," he said. Alara opened her eyes. "I am." "Good." She turned to him. "What about you?" "What about me?" "Are you happy?" Rowan considered the question. Then he said, "Yeah, I think I am." Alara smiled, and Rowan smiled back. A real smile this time. Not almost. Not half. Real. And in that moment, standing in the melting snow, with the sun on their faces and the wind at their backs, they both knew. This was just the beginning. April came in like a thief, stealing the last of the snow and leaving mud in its place. The ground turned soft and treacherous, sucking at their boots every time they stepped outside. The roof leaked worse than ever, dripping into buckets Alara had placed strategically around the cabin. The chicken coop needed new boards. The well pulley had rusted through. The entire north side of the barn was sagging like a drunk leaning against a wall. Rowan stood in the doorway one morning, coffee in hand, staring out at the wreckage winter had left behind. "It's worse than I thought," he said. Alara came to stand beside him. "How bad?" "Bad enough that if we don't fix it now, we won't make it through next winter." She looked at him. "Then we fix it." Rowan shook his head. "This isn't your problem." "Yes, it is." "Alara, I live here too, don't I?" Rowan turned to face her. "You don't owe me anything." "I know that." "Then why?" "Oh, because I want to," Alara said. Her voice was firm, steady. "Because this is my home now, and I'm not letting it fall apart. Rowan studied her face, searching for something. Doubt, maybe. Hesitation. He didn't find it. All right, he said finally, but we do this together. No arguing about who does what. I never argue. Rowan raised an eyebrow. Alara grinned. Okay, fine, I argue sometimes. All the time. Only when you're being stubborn. I'm not stubborn. You're the most stubborn person I've ever met. Rowan almost smiled. Takes one to know one. They started with the roof. It was dangerous work. The shingles were old, brittle, some of them rotted through completely. Rowan climbed up first, moving carefully, testing each step before putting his weight down. Alara followed. You don't have to come up here, Rowan said. Someone needs to hand you the shingles. I can manage. I know you can, but you don't have to. Rowan looked at her. Then he nodded. They worked through the morning, prying off the damaged shingles and nailing down new ones. The sun beat down on them, hotter than it had been in months. Alara's shoulders burned. Her hands blistered, but she kept going. Around midday, Rowan stopped. Take a break, he said. I'm fine. You're sweating through your shirt. So are you. I'm used to it. Alara wiped her forehead with the back of her hand. I'm not some delicate flower, Rowan. I can handle this. I know you can, but you don't have to prove it. I'm not trying to prove anything. Then why won't you take a break? Because if I stop, I'll realize how much this hurts. Rowan's expression softened. Take the break, Alara. She sighed. Fine. They climbed down and sat in the shade of the cabin, passing a canteen of water back and forth. Alara looked at her hands. The blisters had opened, leaving raw, angry patches of skin. Rowan saw them. You should have said something. It's not that bad. It's bad enough. He stood, went inside, and came back with a tin of salve. He sat down beside her, took her hand in his, and started applying the salve with careful, practiced movements. Alara watched him. You don't have to do that. I know. Then why are you? Rowan didn't look up. Because you're hurt. I've been hurt worse. Doesn't mean I'm going to ignore it. Alara's throat tightened. She didn't know what to say to that. Rowan finished with one hand and moved to the other. His touch was gentle, surprisingly so for someone with hands as rough as his. When he was done, he looked up at her. Their faces were close, closer than they'd ever been. Alara's breath caught. Rowan's eyes flicked to her lips. Just for a second, then back to her eyes. Alara, he said quietly. Yeah? A loud crack echoed from the roof. They both looked up just in time to see one of the old shingles slide off and crash to the ground. Rowan stood quickly. Damn it! Alara exhaled, her heart still racing. That could have been one of us. That's why we're fixing it. He held out his hand to help her up. Alara took it. And this time, when their hands touched, neither of them let go right away. They worked until sunset, then climbed down, exhausted and filthy. Inside, Alara made dinner while Rowan washed up. They ate in silence, too tired to talk. But it was a comfortable silence, the kind that came from shared effort, from building something together. After dinner, Rowan said, We got about half the roof done. That's good progress. We'll finish it tomorrow. Then we moved to the barn. Alara nodded. The barn's going to take longer. Yeah. We'll manage. Rowan looked at her. You keep saying that. Because it's true. You really believe it? Don't you? Rowan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, Yeah, I do. The next 3 weeks were a blur of work. They finished the roof, rebuilt the north wall of the barn, replaced the well pulley, fixed the fence in 6 different places, cleared the drainage ditches so the spring runoff wouldn't flood the property. Alara's body ached in ways she didn't know were possible, but she was stronger now, faster. She could lift beams Rowan would have done alone a month ago, could hammer nails straight and true, could read the land the way Rowan did, knowing where the weak points were before they became problems. Rowan noticed. You've got a good eye, he said one afternoon as they reinforced a section of fence. For what? For this, the land, the work. Most people don't see it the way you do. Alara shrugged. I pay attention. It's more than that. What do you mean? Rowan straightened, wiping sweat from his brow. You care about it. This place. You treat it like it's yours. It is mine, Alara said. Then she paused. Isn't it? Rowan looked at her. Yeah, it is. Something in his voice made her chest tighten. Rowan, I mean it, he said. You've done more for this place in 4 months than anyone else ever has, including me. That's not true. It is. You've worked harder than I had any right to ask, and you didn't complain once. I complained plenty. Not out loud, Alara smiled faintly. Well, I didn't want to give you the satisfaction. Rowan almost laughed. You're something else, you know that? Is that a compliment? Yeah, it is. Alara didn't know what to say to that, so she just went back to work. But she felt warm all over, and it had nothing to do with the sun. By the middle of May, the worst of the repairs were done. The ranch looked better than it had in years. The roof didn't leak, the barn stood straight, the fences were solid, the well worked smoothly. Alara stood in the yard one evening, hands on her hips, surveying their work. We did it, she said. Rowan came to stand beside her. Yeah, we did. It looks good. Better than good. Alara glanced at him. You sound surprised. I am, a little. Why? Rowan was quiet for a moment. Then he said, because I didn't think I could do this alone, and I didn't think anyone would stay long enough to help. Alara turned to face him. I'm not going anywhere, Rowan. I know. Do you? Rowan met her eyes. Yeah, I do. They stood there, the evening light soft and golden around them, and for the first time, Alara felt like she belonged somewhere. Not just survived, belonged. That night, as they sat by the fire, Rowan said, I've been thinking. About what? About expanding. Alara raised an eyebrow. Expanding what? The ranch. We've got the land. We could add more livestock, maybe some cattle, plant more crops. That's a lot of work. I know. You sure you want to take that on? Rowan looked at her. I'm not doing it alone. Alara smiled. No, you're not. So what do you think? I think it's a good idea. Yeah? Yeah. Rowan nodded slowly. All right then. Alara leaned back against the wall. When do we start? Soon as the ground's ready. That's next week. I know. Alara shook her head, but she was smiling. You don't waste time, do you? Can't afford to. Fair enough. They sat in silence for a while. Then Alara said, Can I ask you something? Sure. Why now? Why expand now? Rowan stared into the fire. Because I've got a reason to. What reason? He looked at her. You. Alara's breath caught. I've been surviving for a long time, Rowan said quietly. Just getting by, day to day. But now... He paused. Now I want more than that. What do you want? I want to build something that lasts, something worth fighting for. Alara's throat felt tight. Rowan, I'm not good with words, he said, but I need you to know. You being here, it changed things. Changed how? It made me want to live again, not just survive, live. Alara stared at him. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought he might hear it. I feel the same way, she said softly. Rowan's eyes widened slightly. You do? Yeah, I do. They looked at each other across the fire, and then, slowly, Rowan stood and crossed the room. He sat down beside her. Alara's pulse raced. Rowan reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. His hand lingered there, his thumb brushing her cheek. I don't know how to do this, he said. Do what? This. Whatever this is. Alara smiled faintly. Neither do I. You want to figure it out together? Yeah, I do. Rowan leaned in. Alara met him halfway, and when their lips touched, it was soft and tentative and careful, like they were both afraid of breaking something fragile. When they pulled back, Rowan rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that for a while, he said. Alara smiled. Me too. Yeah? Yeah. Rowan kissed her again, longer this time, deeper, and Alara felt like she was falling, but for the first time in her life, she wasn't afraid. The next morning, everything felt different. Not awkward, not strange, just different. Rowan made coffee. Alara made breakfast. They sat at the table together, shoulders touching, and ate in comfortable silence. When they went outside to work, Rowan took her hand. Alara looked at him, surprised. "What?" he said. "Nothing, just you're holding my hand." "Is that a problem?" "No, it's nice." Rowan smiled. "Good." They worked side by side all day, clearing land for the new pasture, marking out where the fence posts would go, planning where to plant the crops. It was hard work, back-breaking work, but it didn't feel like a burden. It felt like building a future. That night, as they sat by the fire, Alara said, "I've been thinking." "About what?" "About what happens next." Rowan looked at her. "What do you mean?" "I mean, we're building something here, something real, and I want to make sure we're on the same page." "We are." "How do you know?" "Because I know you, and I know what I want." "What do you want?" Rowan reached out and took her hand. "I want this, you, me, this place, all of it." Alara's chest felt tight. "For how long?" "As long as you'll have me," she smiled. "That might be a long time." "Good." Alara leaned her head on his shoulder. "I've never had this before." "Had what?" "Something worth staying for." Rowan's arm came around her, pulling her closer. "You've got it now." "Yeah," Alara said softly. "I do." They sat there, wrapped in each other, the fire crackling softly in front of them. And for the first time in a long time, neither of them felt alone. The next few weeks passed in a rhythm that felt almost easy. They worked during the day, ate together in the evening, sat by the fire at night, talking about plans, dreams, things they'd never told anyone else. Alara told Rowan about the wagon train, about the terror of that night, about the guilt she still carried for surviving when everyone else had died. Rowan told Alara about his father, about the years they'd spent building the ranch together, about the day his father had collapsed in the field and never gotten up again. They shared their scars, their ghosts, and somehow it made them stronger. One evening, as they sat outside watching the sunset, Rowan said, "You ever think about the future?" "All the time." "What do you see?" Alara looked out at the land they'd been working so hard to rebuild. "I see this place thriving. I see cattle in the pasture, crops in the field, maybe a bigger house someday." "What else?" She glanced at him. "What do you mean?" "I mean, do you see yourself here, years from now?" Alara met his eyes. "Yeah, I do." Rowan nodded slowly. "Good. Because I see you here too." Alara's heart swelled. "I see us building this place together," Rowan continued. "I see us growing old here. I see a life worth living." Alara's eyes stung. "Me too." Rowan took her hand. "Then let's make it happen." "Yeah," Alara said, her voice thick. "Let's do that." They sat there, hands clasped, watching the sun sink below the horizon. And in that moment, Alara knew. She wasn't just surviving anymore. She was living, and she was doing it with someone who saw her, all of her, the broken parts, the strong parts, the parts she'd tried to hide, and he loved her anyway. The realization hit her like a punch to the chest. She loved him too. She didn't say it out loud. Not yet. But she knew, and that was enough. By the end of May, the pasture was ready. Rowan had spent the last week building the new fence, and Alara had helped every step of the way. They worked in tandem now, moving around each other with practiced ease, anticipating what the other needed before they asked. On the last day, as they drove the final post into the ground, Rowan stepped back and wiped his forehead. "That's it," he said. Alara looked at the fence. It stretched across the land, strong and straight, enclosing a space big enough for a dozen head of cattle. "It's perfect," she said. Rowan glanced at her. "You think so?" "I know so." He smiled. "Next step is getting the cattle." "When?" "Next week. There's a seller 2 towns over. Good stock, fair prices." Alara nodded. "How many are we getting?" 6 to start. See how it goes." "That's a good plan." Rowan looked at her. "You want to come with me?" "To buy the cattle?" "Yeah." Alara hesitated. She hadn't left the ranch since the day she'd stumbled onto it, hadn't thought about leaving. But Rowan was asking, and she wanted to go. "Yeah," she said, "I'll come." Rowan's face lit up. "Good." The trip took 2 days. They left early in the morning, the wagon packed with supplies and the money Rowan had saved over the years. The road was rough, rutted from the spring rains, and the wagon bounced and jolted with every turn. Alara sat beside Rowan on the bench, her shoulder pressed against his. "You nervous?" he asked. "A little." "About what?" "I don't know. Being around people again, I guess." Rowan nodded. "Been a while." "Yeah. You don't have to talk to anyone if you don't want to." Alara smiled. "I'll be fine." "I know you will." They rode in silence for a while. Then Alara said, "Thank you." "For what?" "For asking me to come." Rowan glanced at her. "I wanted you here." "Why?" "Because this is ours. The ranch, the cattle, all of it. And I don't want to do any of it without you." Alara's chest tightened. "You mean that?" "Yeah, I do." She reached over and took his hand. Rowan squeezed it, and they rode the rest of the way like that, hands clasped, shoulders touching, hearts full. They reached the town just before sunset. It was small, barely more than a handful of buildings clustered around a dirt road. A general store, a saloon, a livery stable. Rowan pulled the wagon up to the stable and climbed down. "We'll stay here tonight," he said. "Head to the seller's place in the morning." Alara nodded. They got a room at the boarding house above the saloon. It was small, barely big enough for a bed and a washstand, but it was clean. Rowan set their bags down. "You want to get dinner?" "Yeah." They went downstairs to the saloon. It was crowded, loud, full of men drinking and playing cards. Alara stayed close to Rowan as they made their way to a table in the corner. They ordered food and ate quietly, ignoring the stares from the other patrons. Halfway through the meal, a man approached their table. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar running down the side of his face. Alara's blood ran cold. She knew that scar. The man looked at her, his eyes widened. "Well, I'll be damned," he said. "You're alive." Rowan's hand went to the knife at his belt. "You know him?" Alara's voice was barely a whisper. "He was with the bandits." The man grinned. "That's right. And you killed my brother." Rowan stood. "Get out of here." "Or what?" "Or I'll put you down where you stand." The man laughed. "Big talk for a rancher." Rowan's jaw tightened. "Last warning." The man reached for his gun. Rowan was faster. He grabbed the man's wrist, twisted it hard, and slammed him against the wall. The gun clattered to the floor. The entire saloon went silent. Rowan leaned in close. "You ever come near her again, I'll kill you. Understand?" The man's eyes were wide with fear. Yeah, I understand." Rowan shoved him toward the door. "Get out." The man stumbled out into the night. Rowan turned back to Alara. "You all right?" Alara nodded, but her hands were shaking. Rowan sat down beside her, took her hands in his. "He's gone. He won't bother you again." "How do you know?" "Because I'll make sure of it." Alara looked at him, at the fierce protectiveness in his eyes, and she believed him. They left town before dawn. Rowan didn't want to risk running into the man again. They went straight to the seller's place, bought 6 head of cattle, and started the long drive back to the ranch. It took 3 days. 3 long, exhausting days of keeping the cattle moving, setting up camp at night, taking turns keeping watch. But they made it. When they finally drove the cattle into the new pasture and closed the gate behind them, Alara felt a surge of pride so strong it nearly knocked her over. Rowan stood beside her, watching the cattle settle in. "We did it," he said. Alara smiled. "Yeah, we did." Rowan turned to her. "You know what this means, right?" "What?" "We're ranchers now." Alara laughed. "I guess we are." Rowan pulled her into his arms, and Alara held on tight, because this was it. This was home. This was the life she had been searching for without even knowing it. And she wasn't letting go. Summer came in hot and relentless. The kind of heat that made the air shimmer above the ground, that turned the dirt to dust and the grass to straw. By mid-June, the cattle had settled into their routine, grazing in the pasture, drinking from the creek that ran along the eastern edge of the property. Alara checked on them every morning, counting heads, looking for signs of illness or injury. She'd become good at it, better than she'd expected. Rowan watched her sometimes, leaning against the fence, arms crossed, a faint smile on his face. "What?" she'd ask. "Nothing." You're staring. I'm admiring. Alara would roll her eyes, but she couldn't hide her smile. The truth was, she liked it when he looked at her like that. Like she was something worth watching, worth keeping. They worked together every day, their movements synchronized in a way that felt almost effortless. Rowan would start a task and Alara would finish it. She'd point out a problem and he'd fix it. They didn't need to talk much anymore. They just knew. One morning in late June, Rowan came in from the barn looking troubled. "What's wrong?" Alara asked. "One of the cows is sick." "Which one?" "The red one. She's not eating, breathing hard." Alara set down the pan she'd been washing. "Let me see." They walked out to the pasture together. The cow was standing apart from the others, her head lowered, her flanks heaving with each breath. Alara approached slowly, speaking in a low, calm voice. The cow didn't move. She touched the animal's neck, hot, too hot. "Fever," Alara said. Rowan nodded. "That's what I thought." "You got any medicine?" "Some. Not much. We need to isolate her, keep her away from the others. I'll get a rope." They moved the cow to a small pen near the barn, gave her water, tried to get her to eat. She refused. Alara stayed with her through the afternoon, wiping her down with cool water, talking to her softly. Rowan came and went, checking on them, bringing fresh water, looking more worried each time. By evening, the cow was worse. "She's not going to make it," Rowan said quietly. Alara looked up at him. "You don't know that. I've seen this before. Fever this high, not eating, labored breathing. She's got maybe a day, maybe less. Then we keep trying." Rowan crouched down beside her. "Alara, sometimes you can't save them." "I know that." "Then why?" "Because I have to try," Alara said, her voice tight. "I have to try, Rowan, because if I don't, what's the point?" Rowan stared at her, then he nodded. "All right, we'll keep trying." They stayed with the cow all night, taking turns sleeping, keeping watch. Alara dozed off sometime around midnight, her head resting on Rowan's shoulder, and woke just before dawn to find him still awake, his hand resting on the cow's side. "Any change?" she asked. "No." Alara's chest felt tight. She stood, stretched, and walked over to the cow. The animal's breathing was shallow now, rattling. "Rowan," Alara said softly. He came to stand beside her. The cow's eyes were glassy, unfocused. And then, with one last shuddering breath, she went still. Alara closed her eyes. Rowan put his hand on her shoulder. "I'm sorry. It's not your fault." "Still," Alara turned to face him. "We did everything we could." "I know." "Then why do I feel like we failed?" Rowan pulled her into his arms. "Because you care. And caring hurts sometimes." Alara held on to him, her face pressed against his chest. They buried the cow that morning. It took most of the day. The ground was hard, baked by the sun, and digging was slow, brutal work. By the time they finished, Alara's hands were raw, her back screaming in protest. Rowan stood at the edge of the grave, hat in hand, looking down. "First one we've lost," he said. "Won't be the last." "No," Alara wiped the sweat from her face. "You think it was something we did wrong?" "No, sometimes animals get sick. That's just how it is." "I hate it." "Me too." They walked back to the cabin in silence. That night, Alara couldn't sleep. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, replaying the last 2 days over and over in her mind. The cow's labored breathing, the fever that wouldn't break, the moment when everything just stopped. She heard Rowan get up, heard the creak of the floorboards as he moved to the fire. Alara got up and went to join him. He was sitting in his usual spot, staring into the flames. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "No." "Me neither." Alara sat down beside him. "I keep thinking about her." "The cow?" "Yeah." Rowan nodded. "It gets easier." "Does it?" "A little. You learn to accept it. Doesn't mean it doesn't hurt." Alara leaned her head on his shoulder. "I don't want to accept it." "I know." They sat there in silence, the fire crackling softly between them. After a while, Rowan said, "You want to know something?" "What?" "I'm glad you're here." Alara looked up at him. "Even after today?" "Especially after today." Why? Because you didn't give up. You fought for that cow even when you knew it was hopeless. And that says something about who you are. Alara's throat felt tight. What does it say? That you're strong, stronger than you think. I don't feel strong. You are. Alara closed her eyes. I don't know what I'd do without you. Rowan's arm came around her, pulling her close. You'll never have to find out. Alara believed him, and for the first time that night she felt like she could breathe again. July came in hot and dry. The creek started to shrink, the water level dropping a little more each day. Rowan watched it with growing concern. We need rain, he said one afternoon. Alara looked at the sky, cloudless, blue, endless. Doesn't look like we're getting any. No, it doesn't. What do we do? Ration the water, make sure the cattle drink first. We can make do with less. Alara nodded. How long can we last? Depends on the creek. If it dries up completely, we've got maybe 2 weeks. And then? Rowan's jaw tightened. Then we start losing cattle. They rationed the water carefully. Alara stopped bathing, started wearing the same clothes for days at a time. Rowan did the same. They drank sparingly, only when they had to, saving every drop for the animals. The heat was suffocating. The air felt thick, heavy, like breathing through wet cloth. Alara's skin was perpetually sticky with sweat. Her lips cracked. Her head ached. But she didn't complain, neither did Rowan. They just kept going. One evening, as they sat outside watching the sun set, Alara said, You ever think about giving up? Rowan looked at her. No. Never? Never. Why? Because giving up means losing everything, and I'm not willing to do that. Alara studied his face. What if it's not enough? What if we do everything right, and it still falls apart? Then we pick up the pieces and start over. Just like that? Just like that. Alara shook her head. You make it sound so simple. It's not simple, but it's the only option. Alara was quiet for a moment. Then she said, I'm scared. Rowan reached over and took her hand. Me too. You are? Yeah. You don't act like it. Because acting scared doesn't help. But I am. Every day. Alara looked at him. What are you scared of? Rowan hesitated. Then he said, Losing this. Losing you. Alara's breath caught. You're not going to lose me. You don't know that. Yes, I do. Rowan met her eyes. How? Because I'm not going anywhere, no matter what happens. Rowan's grip on her hand tightened. Promise? I promise. They sat there, hands clasped, watching the sun sink below the horizon. And Alara meant it. She wasn't going anywhere. 3 days later, the sky turned dark. Alara was in the garden, pulling weeds, when she felt the first drop of rain. She looked up. The sky was heavy with clouds rolling in from the west, dark and ominous. And then the heavens opened. The rain came down in sheets, so hard and fast it was like standing under a waterfall. Alara threw her head back and laughed, arms spread wide, letting the water soak her to the bone. Rowan came running out of the barn. Alara, she turned to him, grinning. It's raining. I can see that. He grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the cabin. They stumbled inside, dripping wet, breathless with laughter. Alara pushed her soaked hair out of her face. We needed that. Yeah, we did. She looked at him. He was soaked through, his shirt clinging to his chest, his hair plastered to his forehead. And he was smiling, really smiling. Alara's heart swelled. She stepped closer. Rowan's smile faded, replaced by something softer, deeper. Alara, he said quietly. She reached up and touched his face. Yeah? I love you. The words hung in the air between them. Alara's breath caught. What? I love you, Rowan said again, his voice steady. I should have said it sooner, but I'm saying it now. Alara stared at him. Her eyes burned. Her throat felt tight. I love you too, she whispered. Rowan's hands came up to cup her face. Say it again. I love you. He kissed her, hard, desperate, like he'd been holding back for too long and couldn't anymore. Alara kissed him back, her hands fisting in his wet shirt, pulling him closer. When they finally broke apart, They were both breathing hard. Rowan rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to say that for months. Why didn't you? Because I was afraid. Of what? That you didn't feel the same way. Alara laughed, soft and breathless. You're an idiot. Yeah, I know. She kissed him again, softer this time, slower. And when they pulled apart, Rowan said, Stay with me, not just for now, forever. Alara's heart pounded. You mean that? Yeah, I do. Then yes, I'll stay. Rowan smiled, the kind of smile that lit up his whole face. And Alara knew. This was it. This was what she'd been searching for her whole life. Not just a place to live, but a person to live for. The rain lasted 2 days. When it finally stopped, the land was transformed. The grass was green again. The creek was full. The air smelled fresh, clean, alive. Alara and Rowan worked together to repair the damage the storm had caused. Broken fence posts, washed out paths, a section of the barn roof that had come loose, but the work felt lighter now, because they had each other. And that made all the difference. One afternoon, as they were fixing the last of the fence posts, Alara said, We should get married. Rowan looked up sharply. What? We should get married, Alara repeated. If we're going to build a life together, we should make it official. Rowan stared at her. You serious? Yeah, I am. You asking me? I guess I am. Rowan set down his hammer. You don't have to ask. The answer's yes. Alara grinned. Yeah? Yeah. She threw her arms around his neck. I love you. I love you too. They stood there wrapped in each other, the sun warm on their backs. And for the first time in her life, Alara felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. They got married 2 weeks later. There was no ceremony, no preacher, no guests, just the two of them standing by the creek at sunset, exchanging vows they'd written themselves. Rowan went first. I promise to stand by you, to work beside you, to protect you, to love you, for as long as I'm breathing. Alara's voice shook when she spoke. I promise to fight for this. For us. To never give up. To love you even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. Rowan took her hand. You're my wife now. Alara smiled through her tears. And you're my husband. They kissed as the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and fire. And when they pulled apart, Alara felt like her heart might burst. This was real. This was hers. And nothing was going to take it away. August brought new challenges. One of the cattle got loose and wandered into the woods. It took Alara and Rowan 3 days to find it, track it down, and bring it back. By the time they did, they were exhausted, scratched up from the underbrush, and more than a little frustrated. We need better fences, Rowan said. We need better everything, Alara muttered. Rowan almost smiled. You're not wrong. They rebuilt the fence, again, stronger this time, higher, and the cattle stayed put. In early September, a traveling merchant came through. He was an older man, wiry and weathered, driving a wagon full of supplies. He stopped at the ranch to water his horses and struck up a conversation with Rowan. Alara watched from the porch as they talked. After a while, the merchant tipped his hat and climbed back onto his wagon. Rowan walked over to Alara. What did he want? She asked. To sell us some things. Tools, seeds, fabric. You buy anything? Some seeds. Thought we could expand the garden next spring. Alara nodded. Good idea. Rowan hesitated. He also said there's been trouble in the next county over. What kind of trouble? Bandits. Same ones that hit your wagon train, maybe. Alara's blood ran cold. How close? 2 days' ride. You think they'll come here? I don't know, but we should be ready just in case. Alara's jaw tightened. What do we do? We keep our eyes open. Make sure the rifle's loaded. Don't take any chances. Alara nodded. All right. That night she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the wagon train, about the screaming, the blood, the man with the scarred face. Rowan noticed. He rolled over, touched her shoulder. You all right? No. Talk to me. Alara turned to face him. What if they come here? Then we deal with it. How? Same way we deal with everything else. Together. Alara wanted to believe him, but the fear sat heavy in her chest, cold and sharp. "I can't go through that again," she said quietly. "I can't." Rowan pulled her close. "You won't have to. I won't let anything happen to you. You can't promise that." "I know, but I'm promising anyway." Alara closed her eyes. "I'm scared." "Me too." "You keep saying that." "Because it's true. But being scared doesn't mean we stop fighting." Alara held on to him. "I don't want to lose this. I don't want to lose you." "You won't." "How do you know?" "Because I'll die before I let that happen." Alara's chest tightened. "Don't say that. It's the truth. I don't want you to die. Then we'll both stay alive. Deal?" Alara laughed, shaky and breathless. "Deal." They lay there in the dark, wrapped around each other, and eventually Alara fell asleep. But her dreams were full of fire and blood. The bandits never came. A week passed. Then 2. Then 3. Alara started to relax, started to believe that maybe they were safe after all. But Rowan didn't let his guard down. He kept the rifle by the door, checked the perimeter every night, watched the road. Alara didn't argue. She knew better. In late September, a neighbor stopped by. His name was Thomas, a grizzled man in his 50s who ran a small farm about 5 miles south. Alara had met him once before, back in the spring. He and Rowan talked for a while, and when he left, Rowan came inside looking thoughtful. "What did he want?" Alara asked. "To warn us. Said the bandits hit a ranch about 10 miles west, burned it to the ground." Alara's stomach dropped. "When?" 3 days ago." "Are they coming this way?" "He doesn't know, but he thinks we should be prepared." Alara nodded. "What do we do?" "Same as before. Stay alert. Stay ready." That night, Alara loaded the rifle herself. She checked the ammunition, made sure everything was in working order. Rowan watched her. "You know how to use that?" "I'm learning." "Good." They ate dinner in silence. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut. After dinner, Rowan said, "I need you to promise me something." "What?" "If they come and things go bad, you run." Alara's jaw tightened. "No." "Alara, I'm not leaving you." "If it comes down to it, I said no." Rowan's eyes flashed. "Damn it, Alara, I'm trying to keep you safe. And I'm trying to keep you safe too, so we stay together, no matter what." Rowan stared at her, then he exhaled hard. "You're impossible." "So are you." He shook his head, but he didn't argue, because deep down, he knew she was right. They were stronger together, and if the bandits came, they'd face them together, or not at all. The attack came 3 nights later. Alara woke to the sound of horses. She sat up, heart pounding, and shook Rowan awake. "Someone's outside," she whispered. Rowan was on his feet in an instant. He grabbed the rifle, moved to the window, and looked out. "How many?" Alara asked. 4, maybe 5. "What do they want?" "Nothing good." Alara grabbed the pistol from the table. Her hands were shaking, but she forced them steady. Rowan looked at her. "Stay behind me." "No." "Alara, we do this together. Remember?" Rowan's jaw tightened, but he nodded. They moved to the door. Rowan opened it slowly. 5 men stood in the yard, torches in hand, guns at their hips. The one in front stepped forward. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a face Alara recognized. The man from the saloon. "Well, well," he said, grinning. "Look who we have here." Rowan raised the rifle. "Get off my land." The man laughed. "Or what?" "Or I'll kill you." Big words for a man outnumbered. Rowan's grip on the rifle didn't waver. "I don't care how many of you there are. You're not welcome here." The man's grin faded. "You cost me a brother. That little bitch killed him." Alara's blood ran cold. Rowan's voice was ice. "She did what she had to do, and if you don't leave, I'll do the same." The man's hand moved to his gun. Rowan fired. The shot echoed across the yard, sharp and final. The man went down, clutching his shoulder, screaming. The other 4 men drew their guns. Rowan grabbed Alara and pulled her back inside, slamming the door shut. Bullets tore through the wood, splintering it. Alara fired back through the window, her hands steady now, her fear replaced by something colder. Anger. Rowan reloaded, fired again. One of the men went down. Then another. The remaining 2 turned and ran. Alara watched them disappear into the darkness, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. Rowan set the rifle down, turned to her. "You hurt?" "No, you?" "No." Alara exhaled hard. "They'll come back." "Maybe." "What do we do?" Rowan looked at her. "We bury the bodies, we fix the door, and we keep going." Alara nodded, because that's what they did. They kept going, no matter what. They buried the bodies at dawn. It was grim, ugly work, but they got it done. Rowan stood at the edge of the graves, looking down. "You think it's over?" Alara asked. "I don't know." "But you don't think so?" "No." Alara's jaw tightened. "Then we stay ready." "Yeah, we do." They walked back to the cabin together. The door was riddled with bullet holes, but it still stood. Rowan started making repairs. Alara helped. And as they worked side by side, Alara felt something shift inside her. She wasn't afraid anymore. She was angry. And she was done running. This was her home, her life. And she was going to fight for it, no matter what it took. The days after the attack were different. Not quieter, not easier, just different. Alara moved through the ranch with a new kind of awareness, her hand never far from the pistol she now kept tucked in her belt. Rowan did the same, his rifle within reach no matter where he was or what he was doing. They worked with one eye on the horizon, listening for the sound of approaching horses, watching for movement in the tree line. But the bandits didn't come back. Not that week, not the next. Still, the tension didn't leave. It settled into their bones, became part of their routine. Check the perimeter, load the guns, lock the doors at night. One morning in early October, as they were repairing the last of the bullet holes in the cabin wall, Alara said, "We can't live like this forever." Rowan looked at her. "Like what?" "Waiting for them to come back, looking over our shoulders every minute." "What else are we supposed to do?" "I don't know, but this isn't living. It's just surviving." Rowan set down his hammer. "You want to leave?" Alara's head snapped up. "No, that's not what I'm saying." "Then what are you saying?" She struggled to find the words. "I'm saying we can't let them control us. We can't let fear dictate how we live our lives." Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "You're right." "I am?" "Yeah, you are." He ran a hand through his hair. "I've been so focused on keeping you safe that I forgot what we're actually fighting for." "What are we fighting for?" Rowan looked at her. "This, us, the life we're building, and we can't build it if we're too afraid to live it." Alara nodded slowly. "So what do we do?" "We keep working, we keep building, and if they come back, we deal with it, but we don't let the possibility of it stop us." Alara felt something loosen in her chest. Okay. Yeah, let's do that." Rowan pulled her close and kissed the top of her head. "We're going to be all right." "You keep saying that." "Because it's true." And for the first time in weeks, Alara believed him. They threw themselves back into the work with renewed purpose. The garden needed to be prepared for winter. The barn needed a new section of wall. The chicken coop was overdue for repairs. There was always something that needed doing, and they did it all. But now, there was a lightness to it, a sense of purpose that went beyond mere survival. They were building something real, something lasting. One afternoon, as they were working on the chicken coop, a wagon rolled up the road. Alara's hand went to her pistol. Rowan stepped in front of her. "Easy." The wagon stopped. An older woman climbed down, her hair gray and tied back in a severe bun. She looked around the property with sharp, assessing eyes. "You Rowan Hale?" she called out. Rowan relaxed slightly. "I am." "Name's Margaret Hollis. I run the general store 2 towns over." Rowan nodded. "What can I do for you?" Margaret walked closer, her eyes taking in everything, the repaired fence, the new barn wall, the bullet holes in the cabin door. "Heard you had some trouble," she said. "Word travels fast." "Always does." Margaret's gaze shifted to Alara. "You the one who killed that bandit?" Alara stiffened. "Yes." Margaret studied her for a long moment. Then she nodded. "Good. Bastard had it coming." Alara blinked, surprised. Margaret turned back to Rowan. "Those men won't be bothering you anymore." "How do you know?" "Because the 2 that ran, they got picked up by the territorial marshal 3 days ago, tried to rob a stagecoach. They're in custody now, waiting to hang." Alara's knees almost gave out. "They're gone?" "They're gone. and the rest of that gang scattered after the marshal started cracking down. You're safe. Rowan exhaled hard. Thank you for telling us. Margaret shrugged. Figured you deserved to know. You've had a rough go of it. She glanced around again. But it looks like you're managing. We are, Rowan said. Margaret's eyes flicked between them. You two married? Yes, ma'am, Alara said. Good. You'll need each other. Margaret climbed back onto her wagon. You ever need supplies, come by the store. I'll give you a fair price. We'll do that, Rowan said. Margaret tipped her head and snapped the reins. The wagon rolled away. Alara watched it go, then turned to Rowan. They're really gone? They're really gone. Alara felt like she could breathe for the first time in weeks. It's over. Rowan pulled her into his arms. It's over. Alara buried her face in his chest and let the relief wash over her. The threat was gone. They were safe. And now, finally, they could really start living. October turned the world golden. The leaves on the trees blazed red and orange and yellow. The air turned crisp and cool. The harvest came in better than expected, and Alara spent days preserving vegetables, salting meat, storing everything they'd need to make it through the winter. Rowan expanded the cattle operation, buying 3 more head from a rancher in the next county over. The herd was growing, the land was thriving, and for the first time since Alara had arrived, the future felt certain. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, Rowan said, I've been thinking. About what? About next year. About what we want to do. Alara looked at him. What do you want to do? I want to build a bigger house. Something with more rooms. A real kitchen. Maybe a loft. Alara smiled. That sounds nice. You think so? Yeah, I do. Rowan hesitated. There's another reason I want more rooms. What reason? He looked at her. In case we need them. Alara frowned. Need them for what? Rowan's cheeks colored slightly. For a family. We decide we want one. Alara's heart stuttered. You want kids? I don't know, maybe. Do you? Alara thought about it. She'd never really imagined herself as a mother. Never thought she'd live long enough to have that choice. But now, sitting here with Rowan, looking out at the land they'd built together, she could see it. A child running through the yard. Laughter. A future that extended beyond just the two of them. Yeah, she said softly. I think I do. Rowan's face broke into a smile. Yeah? Yeah. He kissed her, slow and sweet and full of promise. And when they pulled apart, Alara felt like her heart might burst. This was it. This was the life she'd been searching for. And it was better than anything she'd ever imagined. Winter came early that year. The first snow fell in mid-November, a light dusting that turned the world white and quiet. Alara stood at the window, watching the flakes fall, and felt a strange sense of peace. Last winter, she'd been fighting to survive, fighting to prove she deserved to stay. This winter, she had nothing to prove. This was her home, her life, and she'd earned it. Rowan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist. What are you thinking about? How much has changed? Good change or bad change? Good. Definitely good. Rowan rested his chin on her shoulder. You happy? Alara turned in his arms. Yeah, I am. Are you? Happier than I've ever been. Alara smiled. Good. They stood there wrapped in each other, watching the snow fall. And Alara thought about how far she'd come. From the girl who'd crawled half dead onto a stranger's porch to the woman who stood here now, strong and whole and loved. It hadn't been easy. Nothing worth having ever was. But she'd made it. They'd made it. Together. The winter was hard, but not as hard as the last one. They had more food, more supplies, more experience. And they had each other. Alara spent the long, cold months planning the new house. She sketched out designs on scraps of paper, measured spaces, imagined where everything would go. Rowan watched her with amusement. You're really into this. I am. This is going to be our home. I want it to be perfect. It doesn't have to be perfect. I know, but I want it to be ours. Rowan smiled. It already is. In January, they started clearing the site for the new house. It was brutal work. The ground was frozen solid, and every swing of the axe sent shockwaves up Alara's arms. But she didn't stop. Neither did Rowan. They worked side by side, as they always did, breaking ground for the future they were building. One afternoon, as they took a break, Alara said, "You ever wonder what your father would think?" Rowan looked at her. "About what?" "About this. About us. About what we're doing." Rowan was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "I think he'd be proud." "You think so?" "Yeah, he always wanted this place to be more than just a ranch. He wanted it to be a home, a legacy." Rowan looked out at the land. "And that's what we're building." Alara's throat felt tight. "I wish I could have met him." "Me too." They sat in silence for a while. Then Rowan said, "What about your family? You ever think about them?" Alara shook her head. "Not really. They made their choice. I made mine." "No regrets?" "None." Rowan nodded. "Good." Alara looked at him. "This is my family now. You. This place. That's all I need." Rowan reached over and took her hand. "That's all I need too." By February, the foundation for the new house was laid. It was a good foundation, strong, level, built to last. Rowan stood back, surveying their work. "Not bad." Alara grinned. "Not bad? It's perfect." "You keep using that word." "Because it's true." Rowan shook his head, but he was smiling. They started on the walls in March. It was slow going. Every board had to be measured, cut, fitted into place. Alara's hands were covered in splinters and calluses, but she didn't care. This was theirs. Every nail, every beam, every inch of it. And it was worth it. One evening, as they were working late, Rowan said, "You know what I realized?" "What?" "A year ago, I was alone. This place was falling apart. I didn't think I'd make it through another winter." Alara looked at him. "And now?" "Now I've got you. And this place is better than it's ever been. And I can't imagine doing any of this without you." Alara's eyes stung. "You're not going to make me cry, are you?" "Maybe," she laughed, wiping her eyes. "I feel the same way. About you. About this." Rowan set down his hammer and pulled her close. "We make a good team." "The best." He kissed her, soft and slow and full of everything they couldn't put into words. And when they pulled apart, Alara knew. This was forever. By the end of April, the house was done. It wasn't perfect. The walls weren't perfectly straight. The floor had a few uneven spots. The door stuck a little when you opened it. But it was theirs. And it was home. They moved in on a warm spring evening, carrying their few belongings from the old cabin to the new house. Alara stood in the middle of the main room looking around. It was bigger than the cabin, brighter. There was a real kitchen with a proper stove and counter space, 2 bedrooms, a loft that looked out over the land. It was everything she'd imagined and more. Rowan came up behind her. "What do you think?" "I think it's perfect." "You always say that, because it's always true." Rowan wrapped his arms around her. "You did good, Alara. We did good." "Yeah, we did." That night, they slept in their new house for the first time. Alara lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling, listening to Rowan breathe beside her. And she felt something she'd never felt before. Complete. She wasn't searching anymore, wasn't running, wasn't trying to survive. She was home, and that was everything. Spring turned to summer. The cattle thrived. The crops came in strong. The ranch was doing better than it ever had. Alara and Rowan worked together every day, building, growing, expanding, but they also made time for each other. For quiet evenings on the porch, for long walks through the land, for moments that had nothing to do with work and everything to do with just being together. One evening in late June, as they sat watching the sunset, Alara said, "I'm pregnant." Rowan's head whipped around. "What?" "I'm pregnant." Rowan stared at her. "You're sure?" "Yeah, I'm sure." A slow smile spread across his face. "We're having a baby?" Alara nodded, her own smile growing. "We're having a baby." Rowan let out a whoop of joy and pulled her into his arms, spinning her around. Alara laughed, holding on to him. "Careful." Sorry. He set her down gently, his hands on her face. "You're pregnant." "I am." "We're going to be parents." "We are." Rowan kissed her, hard, then soft, then hard again. and when he pulled back, his eyes were wet. I love you. I love you too. They sat there, wrapped in each other, watching the sun sink below the horizon, and Alara felt like her heart was going to explode. This was it. This was everything. The pregnancy was hard. Alara was sick most mornings. Her back ached. Her feet swelled. She couldn't do as much as she used to, and it frustrated her. But Rowan was there, every step of the way. He took over the heavier work, made sure she rested, brought her water and food and anything else she needed. And he never complained, not once. One afternoon, as Alara sat on the porch, feeling useless, Rowan came and sat beside her. You doing okay? He asked. I hate this. Hate what? Feeling weak, feeling like I can't pull my weight. Rowan shook his head. You're not weak. You're growing a human being. That's the hardest work there is. It doesn't feel like work. It feels like sitting around doing nothing. That's because you're stubborn. Alara glared at him. You're one to talk. Rowan grinned. Takes one to know one. Alara couldn't help but smile. I hate you. No, you don't. No, I don't. Rowan took her hand. We're in this together, you and me, always. Alara squeezed his hand. Always. The baby came in late February. It was a long labor, painful, exhausting. But when Alara finally held her daughter in her arms, all of it disappeared. The baby was small, perfect, with a thick head of dark hair and eyes that looked just like Rowan's. Rowan stood beside the bed, staring down at them, his face full of wonder. She's beautiful, he whispered. She is, Alara said, her voice thick with tears. What do we name her? Alara looked down at the baby. Grace. Rowan nodded. Grace. I like that. He reached out and touched the baby's tiny hand. Grace's fingers wrapped around his, holding tight, and Rowan's face crumpled. Alara had never seen him cry before, but now the tears streamed down his face, and he didn't try to hide them. I'm going to be a good father, he said. I know you are. I'm going to protect her, both of you. I know. Rowan looked at Alara. Thank you. For what? For this, for her, for giving me a family. Alara's throat felt tight. You gave me a family too. Rowan leaned down and kissed her forehead. Then he kissed Grace's. And in that moment, Alara felt like everything she'd been through, everything she'd survived, had been leading to this family, this life, this love. And it was worth it, all of it. The years passed quickly. Grace grew into a curious, headstrong child who loved the land as much as her parents did. She followed Rowan around the ranch, asking endless questions, learning everything he had to teach her. And she followed Alara too, helping in the garden, feeding the chickens, learning to cook and mend, and all the things Alara had learned through necessity. By the time Grace was 5, the ranch had doubled in size. They had 20 head of cattle, a full garden, chickens, pigs, and 2 horses. And they'd built a community. Margaret Hollis stopped by regularly, bringing news and supplies. Thomas, the neighbor to the south, became a close friend. Other ranchers in the area started reaching out, asking for advice, offering help when they needed it. Alara and Rowan weren't alone anymore. They were part of something bigger. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching Grace chase fireflies in the yard, Rowan said, You ever think about how far we've come? Alara smiled. All the time. It's kind of crazy, isn't it? What is? That we started with nothing, and now we have all this. Alara looked at him. We didn't have nothing. We had each other. Rowan's eyes softened. Yeah, we did. Grace came running up to the porch, a firefly cupped in her hands. Look! I caught one. Alara leaned down to look. That's beautiful, sweetheart. Now let it go. Why? Because it needs to be free. Grace opened her hands, and the firefly flew away, its light blinking in the darkness. There are more, Grace said, already running back to the yard. Rowan chuckled. She's got your energy and your stubbornness. Lucky her, Alara laughed. We did good, didn't we? Rowan pulled her close. Yeah, we did. They sat there, watching their daughter play, and Alara felt a deep sense of contentment. This was the life she'd dreamed of, the life she'd fought for, and it was real. More years passed. Grace grew older, The ranch grew stronger. Alara and Rowan grew older too, their hair graying, their bodies slowing down. But they never stopped working, never stopped building, and they never stopped loving each other. One evening, when Grace was 15, she came to them with a question. "Mama, Papa, I want to know something." Alara looked up from the mending she was doing. "What is it?" "How did you two meet?" Rowan and Alara exchanged a glance. "Why do you ask?" Rowan said. Grace shrugged. "I don't know. I just realized I've never heard the story." Alara set down her mending. "It's not a pretty story. I don't care. I want to know." Rowan nodded. "All right, I'll tell you." He told her about the day he'd found Alara on his porch, about the bandits, about the winter they'd survived together. He told her about the work they'd done, the struggles they'd faced, the life they'd built from nothing. And as he talked, Alara watched Grace's face. Her daughter listened with wide eyes, taking in every word. When Rowan finished, Grace was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "You could have died." "Yeah," Alara said. "I could have." "But you didn't." "No, I didn't." Grace looked between them. "Why not?" Alara thought about it. Then she said, "Because I had a reason to live." "What reason?" Alara reached over and took Rowan's hand. "Your father, this place, the future we were building. I couldn't give up on that." Grace nodded slowly. "And you never did." "No, we never did." Grace stood and hugged them both. "I'm glad you didn't." Alara held her daughter tight. "Me too." That night, after Grace had gone to bed, Alara and Rowan sat on the porch, as they always did. "You think she understands?" Rowan asked. "Understands what?" "What it took to get here. What we went through." Alara thought about it. "Maybe not yet, but she will. When she's older. When she's faced her own struggles." Rowan nodded. "I hope she never has to go through what you did." "Me too. But if she does, I know she'll be strong enough to handle it." "How do you know?" Alara smiled. "Because she's our daughter." Rowan squeezed her hand. "Yeah, she is." They sat in silence for a while. Then Rowan said, "You know what I realized?" "What?" "We did it. Everything we set out to do. We built a life, a home, a family. We survived." Alara looked at him. "We did more than survive, Rowan. We lived. Really lived." Rowan smiled. "Yeah, we did." Alara leaned her head on his shoulder. "And we're still living." "Yeah, we are." The years continued to pass and the ranch continued to thrive. Grace grew into a strong, capable woman, just like her mother. She took over more of the ranch work, learning everything Rowan and Alara had to teach her. And eventually, she found her own love. A young man from a neighboring ranch, kind and hardworking, who reminded Alara of Rowan in his younger days. They married in the spring, right there on the land, with the whole community in attendance. Alara stood beside Rowan, watching their daughter take her vows, and felt tears streaming down her face. "You okay?" Rowan whispered. "Yeah, just happy." Rowan put his arm around her. "Me too." When Grace and her new husband rode off to start their own life, Alara felt a pang of loss. But it was a good loss, the kind that came from watching someone you loved go out into the world and make their own way. "She'll be fine," Rowan said. "I know. We raised her right." "Yeah, we did." They walked back to the house together, hand in hand. And Alara realized something. This was what it was all about. Not the struggle, not the survival, but the moments in between. The quiet evenings, the hard work, the laughter, the tears, the life they'd built. One day at a time, one choice at a time. And it was beautiful. Years later, when Rowan and Alara were both old and gray, they sat on the porch of the house they'd built together, watching the sun set over the land they'd spent their lives tending. Grace came to visit often, now with children of her own, grandchildren who ran through the yard just like their mother had. Alara watched them play and felt a deep sense of peace. "We did good, didn't we?" she said. Rowan took her hand. "Yeah, we did." "You ever regret it, taking me in?" Rowan looked at her, his eyes still as sharp as they'd been all those years ago. "Not for a second." "Even when I was stubborn?" "Especially when you were stubborn." Alara laughed. "I love you, Rowan Hale." "I love you too, Alara Hale." They sat there, hands clasped, watching the sun sink below the horizon, and Alara thought about everything they'd been through, the pain, the struggle, the joy, the love, and she realized something. Life wasn't about avoiding the hard things. It wasn't about finding the easy path or waiting for things to get better. It was about showing up every day, even when it hurt, even when it was scary. It was about finding someone worth fighting for, worth building with, worth loving, even when love was hard. And it was about choosing to stay. Not because you had to, but because you wanted to. That was the real strength. Not in surviving alone, but in choosing connection, in choosing to build something with someone else, even when the world tried to tear it down. Alara had started as a survivor, someone running from one bad situation to the next, just trying to make it through another day. But she'd become something more. She'd become someone who built, who loved, who fought for what mattered. And she'd done it all with Rowan by her side. That was the lesson. That was what she'd learned in all these years. You can't build a life alone. You can survive alone, maybe. But to really live, to really thrive, you need someone. Someone who sees you, who fights with you, who stays when things get hard. And when you find that person, you hold on. You build together. You create something that lasts. That was what she and Rowan had done. They'd taken two broken people and built something whole, something strong, something that would outlast them both. And that was worth everything. Alara looked over at Rowan. He was dozing now, his head tilted back, his hand still holding hers. She squeezed it gently. He opened his eyes. "You okay?" "Yeah. Just thinking." "About what?" "About how lucky I am." Rowan smiled. "Me too." They sat there as the stars came out, one by one, lighting up the sky. And Alara knew this was it. This was the life she was meant to live, and she wouldn't change a single moment of it. Not the pain, not the struggle, not the fear. Because all of it had led her here, to this place, this person, this love. And that was everything. The sun rose the next morning, bright and warm, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. Alara stood in the yard, looking out at the land they'd spent their lives building. The cattle grazed in the pasture. The garden was full of life. The house stood strong, its walls weathered but solid. And Rowan stood beside her, his arm around her waist. "Beautiful morning," he said. "Every morning is beautiful here." Rowan looked at her. "You really believe that?" "Yeah, I do." He kissed her temple. "Good." They stood there, wrapped in each other, watching the world wake up. And Alara felt it again. That deep sense of peace, of belonging. This was home. Not just the land, not just the house, but the person standing beside her. The life they'd built together. That was home. And it always would be. Years from now, long after Alara and Rowan were gone, the ranch would still stand. Their children would tend it, their grandchildren, their great-grandchildren. And the story of two broken people who found each other in the wilderness and built something beautiful would be passed down through generations. A reminder that strength isn't just about endurance. It's about connection. It's about choosing to build, even when the world tries to tear you down. It's about finding someone worth staying for and never letting go. That was the legacy Alara and Rowan left behind. Not just a ranch, not just a piece of land, but a testament to the power of love, of perseverance, of choosing each other over and over again, no matter what came their way. And in the end, that was all that mattered. Not where you started, not what you lost along the way, but who you chose to walk beside, who you built with, who you loved. That was the measure of a life well lived. And Alara and Rowan had lived well, together, always together.